Okay, so so the next topic we thought we would discuss, for now that we're all convinced that we want to do gardens, is we want to talk a little bit about soil and making sure that it's kind of okay for you to be doing your gardens, because that has come up as an issue. And so what we do, we have Lindsay, who's going to come, and she's from Keep Growing Detroit, who has done, yeah, who clearly came with her own fan club. Do you have theme music too? Is that right? And sing a song. Awesome, awesome. And she's the one that's going to answer your question about, how to get started in this. But we thought it would be good to talk a little bit about soil and making sure that it is safe for you to do some gardening. So without further ado.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Again, my name is Lindsay Pielack, and I'm here from Keep Growing Detroit, and it's so great to see some familiar faces in the audience who are gardeners. If you're wondering where the people are in the empty seats, it's because they're all out there. Everybody's out there gardening today. We finally gotten through this cool weather, and so now it's time to garden. I also want to thank Cures for having me out. I went to one of the presentations a few months back and was just really inspired by just having these conversations in the community, and also thank you for your support of our work this year, which is helping us to do more soil testing and education about soil testing with residents in the city of Detroit. So as I said, it's a beautiful Saturday, and so where I normally am most spring days is out in the community with thousands, literally thousands of gardeners across the city who have vegetable gardens in their backyards, in their communities, at their schools, and their churches. And what I'm responsible for doing is help them succeed at doing that. So I can absolutely help you with that. I'll get you that in a minute. This week there will be over 1,000 gardens that come to our hot crop distribution. Everybody know what a hot crop is? Tomatoes, peppers, melons, onions, all those things that grow in the hot weather. So they'll be picking up seeds and plants that they'll then go and plant in their own communities. So these are all gardens run by the community. And I could go on and on building on what Jess said about what these gardens are doing out there. Some people are growing in their backyards for their families, to put fresh fruits and vegetables on the table for their family. Some people are doing community gardens on their block to deal with blight or issues. Some people are doing it to build connections between youth and elders and give people a reason to come together. But each of these gardens is really unique. How many gardeners we got out there? All right. And so, and then for those of you who are not maybe gardeners, how many of you out there are eaters, right? Okay, so we got them all. So while the gardeners are on one side of town, on the other side of town today, we have a number of gardeners who are over at Eastern Market selling with Grown in Detroit. And Grown in Detroit is a program that we also coordinate where people are taking the produce that they grow in their gardens, traveling oftentimes less than 5 miles to local farmers markets and making more fresh fruits and vegetables available to the communities. And so at Keep Growing Detroit, our mission is food sovereignty. We want to see that at least 50% of the fruits and vegetables that are consumed by Detroiters are grown by Detroiters for Detroiters here in the city. So that's a pretty lofty goal that we have. But we think it's important that not only do we have better food, but that we own and control the food system that nourishes our bodies and our communities. I know I'm supposed to be talking about soil. I'll get there. So I have the privilege of working with all of these hundreds of gardeners across the city as they get ready to do their gardens and farms. And so, we really have so many resources that we try and support gardeners with to get going, to make sure. So for example, the last couple of years we've been working a lot with early childhood centers to make sure that they have the opportunities to grow gardens at their centers, because we know that when children develop relationships with food early in life, even if they just taste those vegetables, they're likely to go on to be eaters that have healthy habits for the rest of their lives, and clearly will affect issues that we have throughout our lives if we don't have access to fresh fruits and vegetables, or if not, we're not willing to try them. And then again, for the community gardens, we're trying to make sure that this fresh fruits and vegetables is accessible. but our intention is to make this fresh fruits and vegetables better and make our communities healthier. But what happens if in the meantime, when I'm growing that garden with that 2-year-old to teach them how to eat fresh fruits and vegetables, I'm exposing them to lead? We know that lead is something that really affects childhood development, and so it's a real challenge, right? Because if you do have an issue with lead in a child, what's the first thing they tell you to do? Eat more leafy fruits and vegetables, right? So it's a real challenge. But one of our really important roles is to make sure that not only are we providing residents with the support so they can grow these gardens, but so they can do so safely. And that's one of the main roles that I do. So I'm one of the co-directors at Keep Growing Detroit, and what I'm responsible for is garden development. So a big part of my role is getting out and getting with residents to provide technical assistance and education and training around how to garden safely. And one of the biggest things is that soil testing. So the first thing is just making people realize that it's important to test the soil. So when people join the Garden Resource Program or when we do classes, we talk about the importance of testing your soil before you even stick a shovel in the ground. And so oftentimes people will say, well, I'm going to just go in a raised bed, so why do I need to test the soil? And the reason is that it's lead, one of the main things that we're concerned about. It's not so much what the plants take up as it is the hand-to-mouth contact with that soil. So say this table is your garden, ladies. You may be gardening right in there, but the little 2-year-old next to you or your shoes are down here playing in the soil, eating, hand-to-mouth contact, and then your shoes, right? You walk from your garden into your house, you walk across the floor, you leave all that dust on your house, and then that becomes dust that then you're exposed to, and that could be leaded soil. So even if people are planning to do raised bed gardens, we still would want to get out there and help them test the soil. So we use standardized methods to go out and test people's soils. It doesn't take that long. It takes, from the time you take the soil test, we send it to a lab in about 2 or 3 weeks. About 3 weeks, it'll come back. And it's a very, very simple thing to do. And then once the soil test comes back, we give people advice on what the best way to proceed is. Sometimes, unfortunately, the answer is it's not necessarily the best place for you to choose to garden there, right? Like if you're starting a community garden and it's a bare soil and it's full of lead, maybe that's not the right place to garden. However, sometimes you can still grow there, so we try and help you with guidelines for when it's safe to grow there and when you should choose another site. And if you choose to still grow there, sometimes this is your backyard, right? And it's full of lead. What do you do? So we try and help people with good gardening practices, we call them. We have this guide for how to take a soil test as well as how to interpret soil tests. We try and give people good gardening practices so that they can safely grow. So what that looks like, sometimes if there is an issue with lead, is raising the garden up, covering all bare soil around that garden, making sure that you're testing lead levels of children, bringing in clean soil to fill the beds, and then considering retesting every 3 years. And then even for the garden sites that come back with no issue at all, we still encourage people to use good gardening practices as well to build up your soil by things like adding compost and nutrients, which make lead less available to take up through the plants. And so we're just trying to provide that support so that people can grow safely. And the last thing I want to say is, there's one thing to just teach people about, how to test their soil or how to garden. But I just also, want to close and say, as it relates to all the things that Jess was talking about, not only do we have to make sure these resources are available to our community, we also have to work to connect people to these opportunities. And that's one of the strongest points of the Garden Resource Program, is really that people may come because they want to get those really inexpensive and high quality vegetables from us, but they come back for the relationships and the opportunities to meet and mingle with their neighbors, and then the opportunities to get linked into all of these great resources, which can help us as a community to grow in healthy ways, but also in ways that just support our whole community and being more connected and able to make the choices that we want, and in our case, specifically around the kinds of neighborhoods we want to live in, the kinds of foods we want to feed our family, and the ways that that we all live in this great city. So thank you so much for your time. In the packets are all the materials about our programs and education classes, and there's also a few people in the room. Raise your hand if you're a Garden Resource Program member. I'm looking at you, Kofi. Who can answer your questions also about the resources available. So thank you so much. You lost your name tag there, sir.
So, are there any questions for Lindsay?
So I would say, so we encourage people, we use non-chemical organic methods of teaching people how to grow their gardens. I can't necessarily control what people do. However, I would, when we teach classes about basic gardening or things like that, we're encouraging people to use preventative measures so they don't have to use, pest killers or weed, killers. I know you hate weeding, but my solution would be, let's teach you how to prep your garden well so that you don't have as many weeds to start. In terms of the grass, usually you're removing the grass, before you're planting a garden there. So I wouldn't say that's a huge concern, but I think in general, it's something you need to be concerned about. I mean, one of the conversations I have a lot with people is where's our food coming from, and what are the processes that are used in these large farms? In terms of what are apples sprayed with and things like that. And so yes, I absolutely think it's important to understand what chemicals are used in that area, and then use preventative measures to reduce your exposure to chemicals and pests. But you can grow gardens without using those materials. Not pesticides per se. No, that wouldn't show up in the typical soil test. No. Yeah, but I would say I guess I don't know in terms of I'm not. I would have to look into that for you in terms of there's so many different pesticides and chemicals out there that I would say, know what you're looking for, and then do your research to be able to know what you're looking for, because a soil test primarily is showing heavy metals as well as nutrient content and then the pH of the soil.
And one more comment about that. So stay tuned on that also, because we just had one of our Cures member come forward and it would like to offer they have the capacity to test soil for almost anything within the department. And so we're looking for ways to be able to offer that to the community. So stay close. Let me mention this guy right here, Brian Smith, raise his hand. So, who has a swag like Barack Obama. So he can connect you with anyone within Cures. So if you don't get any other information, get his before you go, okay? Oh, there he is right there. It's almost your turn, almost your turn. Hold on a second, with your fatigues on, looking like you're going into battle. All right. Yes, sir. There's a question here.
Okay. I wanted to know, is there a humane way to repel bunny rabbits? I'm a good person.
Wait a minute. You going after the bunny rabbits? Really? Bunny rabbits, really? I'm sorry.
All right, so the first thing that I always tell people is plant some extra, which I know that's not what you want to hear. But there are a number of ways to deal with pests and weeds. I think the first one is knowing who are the pests. Sometimes people think it's one pest, but really it's something else. For the bunny rabbits, there are tricks and techniques. For example, I've heard that hanging a bar of ivory soap in your garden repels rabbits. or sprinkling like red pepper around the edges of your garden will help with squirrels. So, but the thing is that you have to try these things, but I think you'll find that once you get around gardeners, you can get tips and suggestions from people of what to try, and sometimes you have to get out there and try it, and then sometimes you have to take my advice and plant a little bit extra, because I always say the benefit of growing the garden and having one of those, one of those lettuce plants gone is better than having no garden at all. So I know that's not what you want to hear, though. Did you have a question?
Yes, you mentioned in our packet there would be schedule of the classes. Where's the packet?
Sure, you can have this one, right? So the Garden Resource Program, it says it right at the top of the paper. It's a black and white sheet. Is a program that you join. As a family garden, you pay $10. A community garden or school garden, you pay $20. If that's an issue, you can talk to me and we can talk about waiving your fee. But the idea is that you join the program and you get seeds and plants. After that, we have all sorts of resources like soil testing, tilling, compost, tool sharing, technical assistance like from us, and all we ask of you to get those resources is to show up. So to come out to at least one class, to come out to one volunteer day, and the idea is that if you show up for one thing, you're active and then eligible for all those resources. The yellow sheet that you have there is all of our classes for April and May. So every 2 months we put out a bulletin with classes. So like today, for example, we have a work day over on the east side where 20, 25 gardeners will all go to a garden site and help each other out in the garden for the day. And it's a way not only to help your neighbor out, but to learn some growing techniques. Today they're focusing on container gardens. So people who go to that workshop also get a container for their garden. And then we have tours and potlucks and all sorts of education. I only brought a few of the calendars, but there's these big calendars here that she has. And that's kind of that's the schedule for the whole year, and I have, I think, a few more, but that's how you would get involved. And then the idea is that everybody comes and pick up their seeds and plants, but after that, you can pick and choose the activities that you want to participate in.
Awesome. One more question, maybe? So let me say a couple things. Thank you so much, Lindsay, about that. I really can't emphasize this issue about fresh is best enough. I'm reminded of, I have at home, I have a loaf of bread that I've just been keeping. It's now approaching about a year, and it does not have any mold on it at all. And so I'm thinking, if it's like a year and no mold will grow on it, that's probably not that healthy. I'm just thinking. I won't tell you what brand of bread it is and that type thing, but I just want you to pay attention to that. The other thing that was mentioned, remember about the lead, is that about 90% of what is inhaled would be absorbed, only about 40% of what goes into your mouth is absorbed, and the amount that is absorbed is dependent upon the presence of other nutritional factors. Like if your diet is good in lead and calcium and that type of other minerals, it doesn't necessarily grab the lead. But if it's low in those things, then your body will grab the lead if it is there. So the issue of nutrition becomes very important. The other thing that I would like to mention is that we do have a Facebook page. I appreciate the questions, because if we can't find, first of all, ask them, because oftentimes the question is present in the community and we can identify the answer for you. If we don't have the answer, we may research the answer. So please stay engaged. The last thing that I'll say before we move to the other speaker, this whole thing about gardens may become increasingly important with the whole introduction of drainage fees now in Detroit. People may have heard about that. So there are certain things that you can do to minimize the impact of those drainage fees. So in any event, and we actually plan on having a future talk maybe in the fall to discuss that as well. So be on the lookout. So our